The 72nd birthday of the NHS is about to be marked across the UK with a nationwide clap to thank the health service and those who work in it. We'll bring you the scenes live. Amid COVID-19, the head of the NHS in England calls for social care to be reformed and better resourced once and for all. Job centres are to get thousands more staff amid fears of rising unemployment. Labour pushes for the furlough job retention scheme to be extended. A robot scientist at work. Could there be many more of these in labs as social distancing limits the numbers of humans? And at the Austrian Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton leads Formula One drivers, taking a knee against racism. Good afternoon. Around the country, people are beginning to mark the 72nd anniversary of the NHS with a nationwide round of applause. This anniversary comes amid the coronavirus pandemic, a challenge unprecedented in more than 7 decades of the health service. But after the regular weekly claps for carers, this is another opportunity for people everywhere to show appreciation for NHS staff and a service that is there for us all when we need it. So here are the scenes around the UK, starting in Cardiff.
This is the University Hospital in Cardiff, the largest in Wales, a country which played an integral role in the birth of the NHS. It was, of course, a Welsh MP, Nye Bevan, who helped bring the idea of universal free healthcare to life 72 years ago. The last 4 months have arguably been its biggest ever test over those 7 decades, one the staff here have really taken to with commitment. At one stage, there were over 30 patients in critical care with COVID. Now only a handful remain. But it's not just the work of the healthcare team that we're celebrating today. It's all of the air ambulance workers, the fire crews, the police staff, the carers, everyone who has kept the country safe through this incredibly tough time.
This is Piccadilly Station in Manchester, as well as passengers joining. There's applause here from the staff of Network Rail, British Transport Police, train operators, cleaning and security staff. They've all been helping to play their part to keep the country moving safely during the pandemic. They've enjoyed their weekly Thursday night clapping here. They say they're pleased to do so again today. And Manchester, of course, has a special connection to NHS history. This city is home to Trafford General Hospital, which in 1948 was visited by the Health Secretary Nye Bevan, who inaugurated it as the first ever national health hospital, marking the moment the NHS was born.
Cause I was a blessed with no fulfill. Don't know how it feels. I wanted to flex and totally chill. I'm making a flip. My life is a flip. My load up the flip.
Yo, you feeling like me? I feel like a prince that turned to a king. Found me a queen. Started a family and got me a team. On top of my dreams. Joiner, I know you inspired by me. Like I was inspired by Nelson Mandela. I give him a rose for every endeavor. A shout out to Julius Erving. One of the legends I worship. Muhammad Ali put to work and he was the champ. The greatest, he earned it. I love that you think that I'm perfect, but I have...
And welcome to the rooftop, the blustery rooftop of St George's Hospital in South London, where more than 1,000 COVID patients have been cared for in recent weeks, and where today staff have gathered to pay their own unique tribute to the organisation they work for. Their 72nd birthday message has been spelt out on the helipad here by those health workers that have been so vital. And as one of the heads of nursing here told us, these have been incredibly difficult times for everyone, but the support of the public has kept up morale and kept us going.
The scene at St George's Hospital, South London, with 72 marked out by NHS staff on the roof of the hospital on the helipad. And as you saw in the scenes, there are many different ways of marking this 72nd anniversary of the NHS, taking place, of course, in the middle of a pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. But you saw singing, dancing, round of applause, and also even a Spitfire fly past. So all the scenes that have been taking place around the country. Well, earlier today, the Chief Executive of the NHS in England, Sir Simon Stevens, called for adult social care to be resolved once and for all. He said the pandemic had shone a very harsh spotlight on the care system, which needed urgent reform. Our political correspondent, Chris Mason, reports.
The pride and gratitude for our carers has once again been there for all to see, but providing and paying for social care remains a colossal challenge.
The carers that work for ourselves and for the NHS have gone above and beyond. And I think there is now this recognition that they deserve better pay, they deserve better conditions. And we're hoping that that really sticks.
Now, the head of the NHS in England says change must come quickly.
I would hope that by the time we are sitting down this time next year, on the 73rd birthday of the NHS, we have actually, as a country, been able to decisively answer the question, how are we going to fund and provide high-quality social care for my parents' generation?
In his first speech as Prime Minister, Boris Johnson made a big promise.
We will fix the crisis in social care once and for all.
That was very nearly a year ago now, and since then political convulsions and then the coronavirus itself further exposing the challenges facing social care. The government acknowledges that there are complex questions that need addressing and a long-term solution is essential. But bluntly, the reality of this year so far has been wrestling with the short-term challenge of attempting to cope with a pandemic.
We protected the NHS during the peak of this crisis, and we will protect the NHS in the future. And even just last week, we put another £1.5 billion in. So we are constantly ensuring that the NHS has what it needs. And just the sums of money that the Treasury have put into the NHS over the last few months have been unprecedented.
In Scotland, free personal care is available. Some care costs are capped in Wales, and home care is free for the over 75s in Northern Ireland. In England, the government says billions of pounds of funding has been made available. Labour say money coupled with a strategy is what's needed.
We need an immediate package of support because the virus isn't over for social care, and we need the long-term changes that provide services with the right funding so that everyone knows as they get older, if they need care and support, it will be there for them.
For decades, governments have promised to improve social care. The big question is whether COVID-19 will be the spur for real change. Chris Mason, BBC News.
The Department of Health and Social Care has said that another 22 deaths of people who tested positive for coronavirus took place over the last 24 hours. That is when they were recorded, and it brings the total number of those who have died during the pandemic to 44,220. We also heard from the Chief Executive of the NHS in England, Sir Simon Stevens, about how the health service is preparing for a second wave of COVID-19. Let's join our health correspondent, Dominic Hughes. What did we learn about how it's preparing, Dominic?
Well, the context of this plea by Sir Simon Stevens for politicians to complete the reform of social care in England reflects the enormous strain that the current fragmented system places on the NHS all year round. And as we celebrate the birthday of the NHS today and we reflect on the Herculean efforts of staff over recent months, Sir Simon Stevens knows he's got some big challenges ahead. He has a workforce that is pretty much exhausted, running on empty. He knows there is a huge backlog of cases that need to be dealt with. There is this ongoing fear about what a second wave might look like and how that might impact on the NHS. And then, as you mentioned, this fear as well, concern around a big spike in winter flu cases, the symptoms of which, of course, are so similar to so many coronavirus cases. And that's why today they've announced what will be the NHS's biggest immunisation programme. But Sir Simon Stevens knows there are some big challenges that lie ahead in the months to come.
Dominic Hughes, thank you very much. More than 13,000 extra staff are to be drafted into job centres in Britain amid fears of unemployment rising sharply as a result of the pandemic. It's part of a series of measures aimed at boosting the economy to be set out by the Chancellor Rishi Sunak. Labour has called for the furlough job retention scheme to be extended for sectors hit especially hard by COVID-19. Here's our business correspondent, Katie Prescott.
At the Victoria Hotel in West Yorkshire, Sunday lunch is back. Families delighted to be out, with someone else doing the cooking and, crucially, spending money. The government will be watching closely to see whether that continues. In an economic statement on Wednesday, it'll set out its plan to protect businesses like these, with a real focus on young people and jobs.
Young people have seen the biggest hit to their jobs so far, and that's because they're most likely to work in the sectors that face really, really big problems from this pandemic. We're talking about hospitality and retail. Lots of young people work there, they've lost their jobs, and they're going to face ongoing problems because those are the same sectors that are going to stay smaller in the months ahead. Even as we reopen, social distancing will keep hospitality, keep the retail industry in really serious trouble.
As a result, Labour says it would like to see the furlough scheme, which wraps up in October, extended.
We're seeing that withdrawal occurring, for example, for beauticians who still can't open at the same time as for those parts of the economy that are already open. We need to have a more sectoral approach to this, a more targeted approach. That links to jobs because it means people won't be becoming unemployed in these big waves.
But with government borrowing running at levels not seen in peacetime, this will all need to be paid for at some point.
The priority now must be boosting the economy and throwing everything possible at doing that. But we do need to see some clear plans, probably in the autumn, such that the markets are satisfied and confident that we have a clear way of dealing with what will be an elevated structural deficit at that point.
The challenge is whether the health crisis can be kept under control as lockdown unravels.
The problem is for policing is when you put that mix of alcohol in, even the most sensible of people will, forget those measures that are there to keep them and their families safe and their friends, and they will party and enjoy themselves, and that often means breaking that social distancing principle.
Reopening is not a tidy business, and on Wednesday the Chancellor will face the challenge of cleaning up some of the economic mess left by the coronavirus lockdown. Katie Prescott, BBC News.
It is a month since the internationally recognised government of Libya finally managed to take back full control of the capital, Tripoli, with extensive help from Turkey, defeating a long offensive by a rival force. The battle between the two drew in other countries, taking different sides, marking the most recent stage in a long battle for control of Libya ever since Colonel Gaddafi was deposed in 2011. Our international correspondent Orla Guerin has had rare access to Libya, and she sent this report from Tripoli.
Flying in to Libya, where the oil-rich landscape has shifted thanks to intervention from Turkey. Its presence here has been largely unseen, but we gained rare access. On the red carpet, up close and masked, the Turkish Defence Minister Hulusi Akar, seen as the new power in town. And here's why. Victory celebrations by fighters loyal to the UN-backed government. They kept control of the capital thanks to Ankara. So, corona bumps and gratitude from Fayez al-Sarraj, Libya's internationally recognised Prime Minister. But is Turkey planning a permanent stay on this foreign soil? I put that question to the Defence Minister.
Saying that would be incorrect. Our presence here is based on bilateral agreements with the legitimate Libyan government, recognized by the UN. And this is in line with international law. Our presence will continue. We are trying to help our Libyan brothers by consulting on military training and cooperation.
Turkish forces are on the ground in Libya, northern Iraq and northern Syria. One of NATO's most powerful armies often seems to be going its own way. Turkey's presence here is part of an expanded footprint across the Middle East. Ankara wants to be a key player in the future, whatever emerges from the chaos in Libya, and it's flexing its muscles across the Middle East. And it's creating waves in the eastern Mediterranean, where there's a lot at stake, not least gas reserves. The minister made a flying visit to this Turkish warship off the Libyan coast. He strongly denied claims from France that Turkey harassed one of its vessels in the area. But with its deepening involvement here, Ankara is sailing in choppy waters. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Tripoli.
A robotic scientist that could increase the pace of discovery has been developed at the University of Liverpool. It's part of what's being called a new digital age for science, with artificial intelligence and robotics keeping research moving at a time when social distancing means fewer human scientists in their labs. Victoria Gill has more.
Keeping the experiments going single-handedly. In a chemistry lab that's been closed to most human researchers since the beginning of lockdown, this robotic scientist has been working 24 hours a day, all alone. Just occasionally, its designers are able to check in on their intelligent machine.
Doesn't get bored, doesn't get tired, works around the clock, doesn't need holidays. It frees up my time to focus on innovation and new solutions rather than doing the same action over and over again, because it would easily go through thousands of samples, which would take me a very long time to do by hand.
In the age of social distancing, this £100,000 robot has taken on a whole new role.
So many of us are going to have to get used to keeping our distance from each other and just not coming into workspaces that we used to share with other people. And this robot scientist can keep experimenting 24 hours a day so that the human scientists can work from home.
In manufacturing, robots are often used, programmed to repeat one task. But this new generation of robotic researcher actually learns as it works. It can record its results and use them to fine-tune the next set of experiments.
So could these machines do all of the science?
Absolutely not. This is about human beings harnessing all of these digital technologies so that they can explore bigger and tackle much more complex problems like decarbonisation, preventing and treating disease, making the quality of our air cleaner. But we'll always need people.
So with time-consuming tasks increasingly done by robotic collaborators, the next generation of human scientists could be trying to solve some of the world's most pressing problems from home. Victoria Gill, BBC News.
Time now for the sport. Let's join John Watson at the BBC Sports Centre. Hello, John.
Michelle, thank you. It proved a frustrating weekend for world champion Lewis Hamilton as his Mercedes teammate Valtteri Bottas won the opening Grand Prix of the Formula One season. Before racing began in Austria, most of the grid took a knee in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, as Andy Swiss reports.
The return of Formula One in face masks, and it wasn't the only symbol of how the world's changed in its absence. Lewis Hamilton taking a knee to show his support for the Black Lives Matter movement. All the drivers with an anti-racism message, although 6 chose to stay standing. Hamilton's car is now black to show the Mercedes team's support for diversity. But starting back in 5th, it was instead teammate Valtteri Bottas that led the charge. Hamilton battled his way up to second, but under pressure from Alexander Albon, Albon was out, but it was decided Hamilton was to blame, and a time penalty meant although he crossed the line second behind Bottas, he was pushed down to fourth. His dismay, though, was another Britain's delight, 20-year-old Lando Norris finishing third. In these different times then, a very different-looking podium, but as the fizz flowed, the celebrations, it seems, never change. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
Sheffield United earned a 1-1 draw with Burnley in the first of 4 Premier League games today, a result that keeps alive their hopes of European qualification. Twice. Aston Villa are in the bottom 3 and hoping to avoid dropping back into the Championship at the first time of asking. They're taking on the champions Liverpool. Half-time at Anfield, it remains goalless there. And you can follow live text updates over on the BBC Sport website this afternoon. And a reminder that Southampton take on Manchester City later. Kick-off is at 7 o'clock, a match you can watch live on BBC One this evening. Michelle.
John, thank you very much. John Watson there at the BBC Sports Centre. More now on today's anniversary of the NHS. The nationwide clap that just took place comes after the many that we saw through these months of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our home editor, Mark Easton, has been exploring our relationship with the health service.
This evening, the nation came together in gratitude, on pavements and doorsteps, mighty and humble, to say thank you to the NHS and all those who did their bit to save lives during the pandemic. The hope is that every July the 5th, the health service's birthday, the country will find a moment to remember Britain's key workers, embedding what began as a social media post into the national calendar.
What we have proven is that we can be there for each other in the last months, whether it is volunteering and looking out for one another. So if we can hold on to that, then we are just stronger as a nation to go through any crisis that we're going to face.
This afternoon, a Spitfire took to the skies over East Anglia to tip its wings above the region's hospitals, a message of thanks painted on its underside. It also flew over the Cambridgeshire village of Witchford to acknowledge the efforts of local women who spent lockdown sewing scrubs for doctors and nurses.
We've brought everybody out who's been making the scrubs, and yeah, we're really excited and honoured to see them flying over.
As the NHS celebrates its 72nd birthday, this is a moment not only for the country to record gratitude for the NHS, but I think for all of us in the NHS to say thank you to everybody who's helped us help you.
Last night, public landmarks were illuminated in the blue of the NHS, including Windsor Castle, where the Queen is in residence. The Prince of Wales paid his own personal tribute to health workers.
Remarkably selfless nurses, doctors, paramedics and countless other staff have made costly sacrifices to provide treatment, and in tribute to them we have come together as a nation to thank them for their skill, professionalism and dedication.
After this evening's clap, the country was invited to share a cuppa or a glass with their neighbours, the hope that the community spirit which germinated during the lockdown can be nourished for the challenges to come. Mark Easton, BBC News.
Our home editor reporting there. And if you look on the BBC News website, you'll find the history of the NHS over these 72 years. There's more throughout the evening on the BBC News channel. We're back with the late news at 10 o'clock tonight. Now on BBC One, time for the news wherever you are. Goodbye.